welcome back to the Hall of Sports podcast. We're back for another football after show, and actually, we just have a bit of breaking news at the moment. So, Jesse Lingard has just been, it seems like it's been an agreed deal on Sky Sports there that he is moving to West Ham on loan. So that's an interesting one, which we will get to in the video, and we're going to kind of work on some of those kind of big kind of transfer rumors towards the end. But what we want to do first of all is kind of talk about some of the midweek fixtures that we've seen over the last 2 days, and there's been some really interesting ones. Before I do that, I'm going to introduce you to obviously my two co-hosts from all the way over in Elite Football Show on Red Devils Talk. We have Joe and Haider. How are you doing today, guys?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, mate. Yeah, all good. Good to be talking to you guys as always.
Mate, a draining day. Absolutely draining day. Twitter's been horrible. The reaction after United loss has been horrible. But I'm here with my two favorite people. Oh, a funny story actually, guys. I messaged my new manager and I was like, "Oh, I can't log into my account at work." She's like, "Yeah, because it hasn't been created yet." Great way for a first impression. I got the vibe she was quite cold to me in my interview as well. I thought I didn't get the job, but she's now my manager, so I'm a little bit. Oh, mate, it's been a day. Put it that way.
So she's just that type. So it's one.
Well, no, she's lovely. I don't want her to see this and actually to think that I'm saying anything bad about her. She's absolutely lovely. She's great. She's
a brilliant manager. Yeah, great start anyway. But yeah, so what we're gonna do to start off is actually, I wasn't planning on talking about the West Ham and Palace game, but the one interesting story that came from that was actually the whole idea about Souček. So he had another phenomenal game. So has he become David Moyes' next Fellaini? I'm going to start with you, Joe. How impressed have you been with Souček this season?
Yeah, I think the title says it all, mate. Yeah, I think he has become the next Fellaini, mate. And I think it's probably what David Moyes has been crying out for since he lost the United job, obviously, because obviously it didn't work out at United, but it didn't work out for him at his next couple of clubs either, did it? You know what I mean? Obviously, he went over to Spain and it didn't work out there for him. So, no, he definitely had, because he's become that focal point for David Moyes, especially at set pieces now. David Moyes seems to like that tall, physical player that's a presence in the box, but also, even from open play now, he's making those sort of Fellaini-type runs into the box, and, he's a target for them. And I think he's been a revelation. It's unbelievable. I mean, he's gone into my fantasy team the last couple of weeks, and he's probably been my top scorer, to be honest. It's been great. And I think, to be fair to David Moyes, not only Souček, but I think he's unlocked a couple of gems at West Ham, hasn't he, since he's gone there. I think Tuchel as well at fullbacks being, he plays as a wing-back, doesn't he? I think he's arguably been one of the best wing-backs in the league so far this season. So fair play to them, shrewd signing and just what David Moyes was looking for, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting one there, because again, we didn't expect too much from West Ham under David Moyes, because there was this joke that was going around towards the end of last season that West Ham played better when Moyes wasn't there. But how impressed have you been with them this season, Haider? Because we've spoken about it a couple of times, and I think we've been more surprised in their kind of attacking ability this year, because they haven't changed that much from last season, but the way they've played has been excellent.
Mate, I'm very, very surprised. I actually tweeted that, didn't I, the Fellaini comparison. And I also, before the season started, we had Jim Selverson from Sports Social, as you know him as well. He's a really lovely guy. He's a West Ham fan. And when he came on for a pre-season overview before the season started, he said to me he's very, very worried. I mean, he'd just be happy if he didn't get relegated. They obviously have the GBS out, Gold, Brady Sullivan out movement. They're very, very unhappy. I honestly think that the fact we spoke about last night, that actually some teams are benefiting from having no fans, and I think they're one of those teams. I mean, you remember the scenes that we saw when they were protesting just outside the directors' boxes, and some nasty stuff. I mean, I wish United fans would do that, to be honest with you, at Old Trafford. But what you're seeing, though, is actually, I think West Ham are calmer because they know that they've got a very passionate fan base, an unhappy fan base. And I think they're one of those teams that are really, really thriving off the fact that there's less pressure, they're not feeling that if they make a bad pass or and then these new players are being able to bed in easier. So It works for it works different for different teams. Liverpool are struggling with no fans. I think United at home are struggling without no fans. I really do think that Stretford End sucks the ball into net. But what I'm really impressed with is that, and I'm happy for David Moyes. Now, I never wanted with Manchester United, but what I'm delighted about is he's found a club which it's the right fit. It's his level, and he's basically creating a second Everton. But they're actually entertaining to watch, mate. They're solid. They're disciplined. They've got a good structure, but they've got some really exciting players. I think Jared Bowen has been a revelation there. And what they've done on purpose is that they've decided they're not going to go and spend big like they were on Felipe Anderson's, Sebastian Haller, who are all good players. But they went and spent, I mean, that's a combination of 50 million on both of them. And they've decided to go into the championship, dip into the championship. And they've got Ben Rama as well for nearly 30 million. He hasn't really hit the ground running. They've got Jesse Lingard. They're being smarter with their purchases. They're looking within the UK. And I think that's working well for them because it's just less risk, isn't it? You don't know how they're going to struggle. They're going to cope, these new signings, with the physicality or even just settling into the UK. So no, I'm really, really impressed. I think they're sitting up there in the top 5 or 6 now, I believe, which is just absolutely phenomenal. Really happy for David Moyes. It's been a decade since he's managed to get back on the horse, so to speak. So yeah, I'm delighted for him, and they've been a really good team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other interesting game that came on that early on in the week was the Arsenal over Southampton, because we've seen Arsenal play Southampton twice this season before this game, and Southampton really put a lot of pressure under Arsenal. They pressed them. They really forced them into a lot of mistakes, and Arsenal used that against Southampton in the 3-1 victory. So for me, I think the biggest takeaway to the game is actually we were just talking about it in a podcast just a few minutes ago, Haider. It's the kind of the differences that Arsenal can use within their tactical system now that they actually have. Before, in early on the season, it was like when their first plan didn't work, it was curtains for Arsenal. There wasn't a lot to go there, and I have just a couple of statistics in terms of the game. It doesn't really tell you much about the game, to be honest, because when you look at it there, Southampton 58% ball possession, Arsenal 42%, but it's what Arsenal did with it. You have the all kind of important stat that people like to put out there now, the XG. So Southampton 1.1, Arsenal 1.29. And then the other interesting one is actually the shots. So you had 13 for Southampton and only 9 for Arsenal. But again, both had 5 on target. And look, Arsenal were just more clinical with the chances that they got. But it was very interesting to see them play in the way they did against Southampton, because we haven't seen that happen that much. How impressed have you been, Haider, on kind of the difference that we've seen in Arsenal compared to early on in the season, where look, everybody was laughing at them for being in a relegation battle, but now you look at them and they're only 3-4 points off Chelsea.
Yeah, mate, I've been really impressed. I mean, we did have Pete on and he gave a really good insight. So I'm just going to feed some of the stuff he told us, because I can't confess. I know my brother's an Arsenal fan, but I can't confess that I watch them week in, week out. And I'm not an expert on there. So I will relay some of Pete's fantastic knowledge. And I think the biggest thing is that they kept Arteta. So that was key. We looked at Chelsea sacking Lampard. What they did fantastically well is that they backed him when things were difficult. And then the second thing I think they did as well is they stumbled on, I would say, Emile Smith-Rowe. And I think that was the key. Him coming in and him changing everything essentially is what's given Arsenal that, I want to say, character back in the sides. They brought them some energy, some youth, some exuberance, and Arsenal looked very, very flat. So I think those two things, and look, they couldn't progress the ball through midfield, and that was a big problem for them. So they're starting to add a bit of creativity, players coming into form. I just think that slowly, I mean, look at it, last 5 games, they've won 4, drawn 1. I mean, I believe that's better form than Manchester United. So all these things together, they've done very, very well. Look, they're still not, for me, a top 4 side. I think Arsenal fans are getting a little bit too excited. I don't think they're a good side, if I'm being honest with you. But they're a side playing with confidence. And look, when you put youth into the side, we know this. We've seen Marcus Rashford come in, Mason Greenwood last season. We've seen it all throughout the time at Manchester United. When you put youth into the side, they play without fear. That is one of the biggest things, they play without fear. And that's why people do advocate playing youth. You've got to be careful. You've got to bring them in slowly. You can't thrust them in. The problem is as well is that fans are very impatient with youth. But when you bring youth in and they've come through the system, there's something different about them. The commitment's different. The drive is different. It's a dream for them. So it's great to see for Arsenal fans, but I hope we put one past them or a couple past them on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Joe, the one thing that I noticed from the game is just how they were able to change the way they wanted to play. So they were pressing really high. They were making it really difficult for Southampton to play. The one interesting thing is when you look at Arsenal, when they're in attack, they stay in that kind of 4-2-3-1. But then when they're defending in a conventional 4-4-2. The interesting thing is they saw Southampton defend quite narrow. So they actually did use the width, which you don't always see with Arsenal. Again, we're starting to see players like Lacazette play very well. We're seeing, like Haider said, Smith Rowe, Saka. So how do you think Arsenal need to kind of move forward? Do they need to continue with this kind of aggressive pressing game, especially in a match against Manchester United where we may see Fred and McTominay start again this weekend?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if it's working, don't fix it sort of thing. It's fine. I think when you look at Arteta as well, you think about his education under Pep Guardiola. It's no surprise that he'd want to use an aggressive sort of pressing style game. You can see that. But the key for Arsenal is the same as for a lot of clubs, including United and a lot of other teams. It's about recruitment, Kieran. So if he wants to play that way, that's fine. But he's got to have the players to do it. And you could argue that early on in the season, he didn't have those players that could do that role for him, or they weren't ready to do that role for him, that they just didn't know how to. But I think Haider's right. The youths come in. They're sort of looking up to Arteta in all, probably, and they're wanting to work their butts off for him, if you know what I mean. And I think the whole team's benefited from that. I think, like Haider says, Smith Rowe's been a revelation. He does what Arteta wants him to do in that position. But also, like we said about attacking down the wings, it's no surprise that that's coincided with Saka having a brilliant season. Even Kieran Tierney at left back has been obviously brilliant for them this season. He's almost become their key player, and he's playing at left back. So I think he's just slowly starting to get a group of players that are buying into the way that he wants to play. But there's more to do. Yeah, they've managed to get a couple out this month, and that'll have to continue on in the summer as well, and he'll have to bring in players that fit that style. But I can see where he's trying to go with it, and I think that's all you ask as a football fan sometimes with your club, is you just want to see direction, don't you? You want to see where you're trying to go with your team, the style of play that you're trying to put together. And I do see that with Arsenal, but I still think they're one or two players off being complete in key areas. He still needs a bit more. There's still a couple of players who are playing week in, week out that I think will let you down over time. They might be in a good run of form at the moment, but eventually they will let you down. Players like Xhaka, like David Luiz at the back. But like I said, if Arteta's given time, it'll get to a point where he'll turn it around and those players will be out the club and there'll be players in that he wants.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tricky one because you look at the way Arsenal have played recently and you wouldn't have imagined that this is the same team that went through those 2 or 3 months where they're just above the relegation zone. The one thing that was interesting that we'll look into in terms of the game for the weekend, but the speed of play for Arsenal was much better, and it's something that we didn't see as much. And look, I know we mentioned it earlier with Pete Haider that there was a lot of players in that Arsenal team that just didn't actually care when they were playing for the club. And you have some of the younger players now coming through that seem to really want to do well. And it comes down to that mentality. I had the same conversation earlier on in the week with Jonas when we were talking about Odegaard and why he hasn't been able to make it, or why some of the other younger players at Madrid haven't been able to make it. And a lot of it comes down to mentality. So when we look at this game at the weekend, so we have the United and Arsenal game. Both have had periods of being quite good in the Premier League, while United's has been more prolonged. What type of game do you think that we're going to expect? Will we expect this Arsenal team that we've seen over kind of the last 3 or 4 weeks that have been playing very fast, that have been playing together, that have been pressing? Or do you think that the quality that United do have should be a little bit too much for them?
This is something I've been thinking about all week. I'm not too sure how I couldn't say it for definite what's going to happen. Like, put it this way, and I'll say what Pete says, and he's right. I agree with this. He said that both sides have to win this. It's almost like a cup final. United have to win. After losing to Sheffield United, they could have afforded to draw. Sorry, if they'd beaten Sheffield United, they could have afforded to draw against Arsenal because, you know, you go away to a top 6 side, as long as you don't lose, that's usually good enough. Biggest problem for Manchester United, they lost last night. So for me, United have to go and play. But I honestly think Arsenal will be a bit smarter. I don't expect them to go all gung-ho. I actually think they're going to be the one playing on the counter because they know United's deficiencies. And I just think that Odegaard and Solskjaer can't go out there and look to keep it tight like he did at home. I think we have to take the game to them. I think we've got enough quality to do that. Edinson Cavani is going to be so key. His movement's absolutely fantastic. And we've got the attacking players. We did it against Liverpool. This is a point. This is a Liverpool side that, you know, if there's any counter-attacking side that's up there with the best in Europe or the best counter-attacking side in Europe, it's Liverpool, without a shadow of a doubt. And we went and beat them 3-2, playing, and it was 14 shots all, a very, very equal game. And United took it to them and they won. And I want them to do that against Arsenal because Arsenal don't have the attacking talent that Liverpool do. Saka's brilliant. Lacazette's in good form. Smith Rowe picks up the pockets beautifully. I mean, his movement's absolutely brilliant. He's got to be watched out for. But United have enough quality going forward. They really do. So I think Arsenal will be the ones that will play a bit more conservative. And I think Ollie will go conservative as well, but I don't think he should. Now, if you're playing McFred, we know the issues with McFred, don't we? The progression through midfield is always an issue. But it also allows you to have more solidity, and it also allows the front four to go and do what they've got to do. So, yeah, I think Arsenal will sit back, and I think United will do the same. I don't think it's going to be that an entertaining game. I think both sides and managers will fear not losing, and that's a bit of an issue for me. But I hope Ollie proves me wrong.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear for the game, that if both managers just go out there not to lose. The last kind of point that I'll make on the Arsenal game, and what was interesting for me anyway, was the fact that all three of their goals came from kind of the three main tactics that they kind of put out against Southampton. First one was from a very ineffective press, which we know can be, especially against what we've seen when teams have done it to us, that it can really work against teams like United, but it worked brilliantly against Southampton because everyone expected that from Southampton and not from Arsenal. The other thing is when they got the ball back, that they were able to go pretty quickly on the counter-attack, which is great. And then they actually identified one of the key areas that Southampton were quite poor on, and they were able to switch the play. And that's where their third goal came from. And that's one of the interesting things that I think United are going to have to watch out for, is that they need to be careful when they're in possession, but also they do need to go for it. Like, you look at this game at the weekend, and United should be that team that should be really going for it, because at the end of the day, if you're in a title race, it's one of these games that you have to win. What do you want to see, Joe, when we look towards the weekend? Because look, both teams have been, if we forget the Sheffield United game and we were going into this, both teams would be going in on top form. So what do you expect from this game at the weekend? Do you expect a bit of what we saw before, where it was the 1-0 to Arsenal when it was a penalty and there was basically no shots in the game? Or do you expect both teams to be like, we need to win this game, and to go out and actually play more attacking football?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because you look at the first game at Old Trafford and everything would point towards Solskjaer learning from that lesson and hopefully being more aggressive in this game and more attacking. But then you look at the result we just had on yesterday, and he's probably thinking, I don't want to lose 2 in a row, obviously. So he's going to be caught between two stools a little bit, which is a bit worrying. I think a lot of people sort of think that Arsenal play sort of a low block. I don't think they play a low block. They play more, they're happy to let you have possession, but that's different to playing low block, if you know what I mean. But, you know, I'm like Haider. I'd love to see us go for it. I'd love to see us use a different combination in the double pivot. You know, I don't really want to see him at Fred, although I think we will. I'd love us to try and take the game to them, because I don't think this is just an important game in terms of points in the table. I think it's an important game for United's confidence and the players' confidence as well, because if you start getting back-to-back losses, that's when you start getting the wobbles a little bit, I think, and you start to worry about your form genuinely. You know what I mean? I think, like Haider said, if we won in midweek, you could take a draw in that game. It's not catastrophic. But if you lose again on the weekend, especially with the games coming thick and fast, to lose back-to-back doesn't look great for the table, but also doesn't do the players' confidence any good. So I think this is a really important game for United, just to get that confidence of the players back up. And I think the best way to do that is to attack from the first minute and try and win it, but win it well as well, just to restore some of the morale that they may have lost over the last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the next thing that I wanted to come to, we mentioned United being in the title race, but the one team that really looks good this season and they're really coming into their own form is Manchester City. 5-0 against West Brom, and this is without Kevin De Bruyne. It's without Sergio Aguero, Gabriel Jesus. It's scary the way Manchester United or Manchester City are playing, that they're scoring as many goals as they are, and you're getting it from the likes of Ilkay Gundogan. You're getting really good performances from the defense. João Cancelo has been excellent every time I've seen him play. And it's one of those where City kind of went under the radar for long periods, but they just stayed above water to where they were with the likes of Man United and Liverpool, and now are going into top gear and are winning games very convincingly. How impressed have you been with them, Haider? And really, at this point, do you think it's Manchester City's league to lose?
It's ominous, is what I've been saying now for weeks. Look, Manchester City had a difficult season last season in terms of, they didn't win the title. Well, they were terrible last year. And it was always going to be a little bit of a rebuild. Losing David Silva is a lot bigger than people think. And you saw early on in the season, they were still trying to work out how to replace him, where they're going to put Foden there, where they're going to put Gundogan. Gundogan has been absolutely outstanding. He's always been one of my favorite midfielders. When he was playing under Klopp at Dortmund, I was such a big fan. Injury prone, but I thought that's a player I want Man United to sign. If Paul Scholes goes, Man United should sign Gundogan. That's what I used to say back in the day. We're talking, 2013, 2014. Gundogan's been around for ages. What I've been impressed with in Manchester City is that they are defensively very, very solid. And we always say this, defenses win titles. Now, Manchester City gambled big on Ruben Diaz, over 60 million, and people thought that's an absolute crazy signing. But that's shown he's had Van Dijk level influence on Manchester City. They've conceded less than 20 goals. Most of the big sides have conceded. And all they had to do was add goals. And we did think for a while, how are they going to do this without a striker? But Pep Guardiola is an absolutely incredible manager. He's one of the best ever. I know people don't like to give Pep his dues, but he's absolutely phenomenal. To play the way they are without a recognised number 9 and still be doing what they're doing is remarkable. And I hate talking about City like this, but they're just a fantastic side. And we saw their quality when United played in the EFL Cup. The gap has definitely got smaller between United and City. United have got better, but they're still on another level to compared to Manchester City. They're not in a different galaxy, but they're still in the solar system a little bit further away. That's the analogy I like to use. So, yeah, mate, I just think that it's their title to lose. I did actually predict they'd win the title, and obviously we saw they had this bit of a poor start, but like you said, they've kept their head above water. They've just been there and they're waiting, and they look like the most complete side. And look, Manchester United can look. I know people are going to think this is crazy, but Man United can still be there or thereabouts. I really do think that we've got enough quality to do it. It's a question of, can we win those important games? What wins you titles? Victories against Sheffield United win you titles. Not going and beating Arsenal away. You just don't lose that. The biggest problem for us is that Man City went to West Brom and won 5-0. We lost to Sheffield United. And that's what champions do. They put away these relegation relegation sides. They put them away like that easy. And that's what Man United haven't done. And that's what we've got to do to get to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very ominous for Manchester United fans and really anyone else that's wanting to kind of fight for the title. We look at a lot of Liverpool fans out there saying that it's still early and that they want to come back. But look, at the same time, the way Manchester City are playing, and I think we said at the start of the season when we were doing a lot of the previews that I think they have the most complete team. And I was surprised more than most people that they fell off so much last year. I think that they should have been a lot better. And look, I think we're starting to see it. Look, it's been 11 straight wins for Man City. That's unheard of, really. We've seen it for United.
Is that all competitions, Kieran? Yeah. Is that Premier League? Okay, yeah.
All competitions, yeah. 11 straight wins. But I think we said it in the group chat yesterday. It's very hard to see the next game where they lose. So the fact that United lost against Sheffield United, the fact that Liverpool and Tottenham are playing each other at the moment, that one of them is going to drop points, or both of them, it just gives Man City that bit of extra kind of go ahead. Again, we've mentioned some of the other stats that just kind of keep coming out. So 7 goals in 11 games. I don't think we've seen this from him since he's been at Dortmund, when he was one of the best midfielders in the world. And there was a lot of teams that were interested in him, but he didn't leave Dortmund until going to City. He's had a lot of problems with injuries. But Joe, do you think he's been a big difference in the reason why Manchester City have been able to stay at that top level that they haven't been able to get from his performances previously?
Yeah, 100%, absolute, no doubt about it. Haider's right. He's their unsung hero this year. He's a type of player that not a lot of people will notice, and it, like stats like that, that's passed me by. That I haven't realised that at all, but that is really impressive. But I think the difference with him this season for City is I think he's just playing a little bit more advanced than he used to do. He used to be quite deep. He almost used to just sort of sit more and be that quarterback type player, because his passing range is phenomenal, to be honest. You know, that's why I think Haider probably would have liked us to sign him when we lost Paul Scholes, and exactly right. I think we were very close to as well, actually.
We were, yeah. But
yeah.
I think his injury record put us off, Joe. But the thing about him is he's showing Klopp level when he played on the Klopp at Dortmund when they got to the final. He's playing that well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, under Ferguson sort of thing, he was always a bit nervous about medicals, wasn't he? He was very conscious about people's medical history and things like that, which is fair enough. It's a lot of money back in the day. But yeah, no doubt about it. And I think he's the one that's almost took that David Silva role on that Haider was talking about since David Silva's left, because he's the one now that seems to be picking up those spaces on the edge of the box and even inside the box that David Silva used to pick up somehow unmarked. I'm not quite sure how they do it, but Ilkey's doing it brilliantly for Man City, and I think if it continues, that's great. But I think the other thing we can't sort of disregard as well in terms of how Man City's improved is, like Haider said, their defence. That has been the key, because I think the reason they fell off the cliff last season was they had no consistency and no quality at the back. So obviously we know they had Laporte, but he was missing for nearly all the season. So they didn't have him. They just lost Vincent Kompany, and they weren't able to sort of replace him. They were having to play midfielders at the back. And again, going back to what Haider said about Pep being one of the greatest coaches, he is one of the greatest coaches. The only time you can really criticise Pep is when he probably tries to overcomplicate things by putting midfielders in defence or playing Jesus as a left wing back at Real Madrid, even though it worked that night. It just things like that. Sometimes you just look at it and you think he tries to do too much, but actually I think what he's done this season really well is he's kept it simple. He's looked at what he's got. He's firmed up his defence. He's looked at what he's got. And, I'm not saying that what they're doing is easy at the moment, but a lot of the goals that they're scoring coming natural to them. It's just the Pep Guardiola way of playing that they've got back this season, I think.
Yeah, look, I think it's been one of the very interesting things, because a lot of people were criticising Pep Guardiola, and I know there was talk at the start of the season where people were thinking, well, is this Pep's last season? And then he gets that contract extension. And then you're starting to see these performances get better. And a lot of fans of their own teams are like, when will our performances get to that level? Well, we look at what's the difference in City. Were able to bring in Ruben Diaz, that really solidified that backline. Because we were mentioning it before, Haider, is that one of our favourite kind of centre-backs in the league was Laporte. But he hasn't suited playing with Ruben Diaz, and John Stones has. And we've seen that tandem work so well. I think it's really underappreciated just how important a centre-back partnership is to really compete to win a league.
Mate, it's the foundation. You cannot win a league without a top class partnership. They don't necessarily have to be the two best centre-backs in the league. They just have to be a great partnership. They have to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. They have to understand their roles that they have to play. I mean, look, who thought John Stones would be playing where he's playing? But we talk about this all the time. What we're seeing with, just to bring it to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer quickly, is he's actually rotating his centre backs based on the games, and he's actually done a really good job on that. Considering one game he might play Bailly with Maguire, next game he'll play Lindelof, because obviously if we're playing a bit deeper, Lindelof's ball playing ability, he's being able to step past the striker into the space and to start the attacks. It's actually a very it's a very underrated thing Man United are doing. But also the flip side of it is you need that familiarity. You need to have. When did Fergie do that? When did he rotate his centre backs? He never did that. The reason why we're doing it is because none of them are good enough to do everything yet. So when you're looking at City, look, it's massive. Look at all the best Premier League sides of all time. You look at the '99 team. It was it was centre back pairing that played all the time. You had a world class one, obviously, in Stam. Then you have the Chelsea sides on Jose Mourinho. You had Terry Carvalho. You have the United sides. Obviously, we have our two fantastic centre backs, and even the Man City sides. You had Company playing. I believe who did Company play with? I'm missing it now. Can't remember. He played with someone. Yeah. Who was it?
What, with Man City in the early days?
Yeah, who was it in the early days?
Was it Lescott? Well, he wasn't great though, was he? To be fair,
They went through a couple of different ones. I know they had. Otamendi was there for one or two seasons. Who, to be fair to him, he had a few decent runs in. We had another ones that it didn't really work towards the end. Was Demichelis that came in as well.
Yeah,
hey, but Otamendi's a good player, mate. He's not a bad player, but it's just like I said, it's the partnerships. So he played last season with Fernandinho. Fernandinho is not a centre back. So all these things, you're looking at Matip and Van Dijk, or Van Dijk and Joe Gomez. I wouldn't say Joe Gomez is best centre back because Van Dijk was so good.
Yeah.
So all of these.
I think you see it at Madrid as well, Haider, with Ramos and Varane. I think Ramos makes Varane a much better defender. I've seen Varane when he's not playing alongside Ramos, and he doesn't look half the player, to be fair.
Yeah. Exactly, and you look at it, you would say Varane's a world-class centre-back, but actually you put him and Ramos, who's also a world-class centre-back, together, it doesn't, it works, but, when you take them out, then when you take one of them out, it actually makes it look worse. So what I will say is with Manchester City is that they've almost stumbled across a centre-back pairing that works, and they're reaping the rewards. And I just think, all these other sides, you look at Chelsea, for example, Zuma and Thiago Silva. It's not really top class, is it? Manchester United, we know the situation. Liverpool are struggling without Van Dijk. Spurs are doing okay, but again, not top class centre back pairing. The only defense that are going to be keeping clean sheets probably week in, week out, Man City. And if they add goals, they'll win the league, and that's exactly what they're doing. And that's why they will win the league, because of their defense. It's nothing to do with their attack, in my opinion.
Yeah, it goes back to a lot of the big managers over time. I know Ferguson always said it, is that attack wins games, but defenses win championships. And that's the key, is if you have that solid defensive foundation, you win. You look at like we mentioned, some of the greatest teams. You can look at even the Arsenal teams with Sol Campbell, you had Martin Keown, and they kind of worked off each other. And that was one of the keys. This kind of moves us on to kind of the last game that we'll kind of review in depth, but it's probably the game we don't want to, and that's the United and Sheffield United game. And it really goes to the two goals. Look, the first one, again, it's another set piece where that just seems to be something that United are not improving on. You see it, and I don't see a single improvement in the defensive set pieces, and I don't know what they need to do. They either need to bring somebody else in to work on that, or they need to change the system that they're using on these set pieces, because it's not working, and it's very obvious that teams are now targeting that to score goals, especially some of the weaker teams that know they're not going to get many chances, that they're really focusing in on whether it's a free kick or a corner. And look, until United prove that they can actually defend them, it's going to be one of those that teams are going to try and target those areas. And I feel that you look at some of the defensive lapses yesterday, it has to be because when you change, 5 or 6 players from the game at the weekend, it's criminal really to be doing that. We mentioned it before. We were talking about a Haider, that if you're changing something, you probably change 1 or 2 players. Yeah. The most you're going to change is 3. What did you think of the game in total? Personally, it was one of the most boring games that we've had this season, and that's saying something, considering we've seen the United and Chelsea game, the United and Arsenal game, and there's actually others to put in there. But yesterday, even though when we scored the equalizer, there was something about the game that I didn't have a good feeling that we were going to be able to go on and win that game, defensively we looked, especially for the second goal, we looked terrible. What does the coaching staff and the players need to improve on to make sure that that defense is more solid? Because we talk about Man City and how good their defense has been, and yet anytime United struggle, it's usually to do with that defense.
The first thing actually is that United created 16. Well, it had 16 shots on target, but the biggest thing is they didn't have any big chance from at all. Actually, they had 4 shots on target, and put that in perspective, Sheffield United had 5 shots, 3 on target. That says it all. So they were more threatening than us. United, I don't think it was the worst performance we've seen. I think it was the worst performance on the eye test, but when you look at the statistics, it wasn't. United's passing was accurate, 90%. I know these are all statistics, but when you look at what you saw with your eye and what you saw with the stats, which is why I always say stats are great, but actually, if anyone's saying, "Oh, we did this and this with stats," then it's rubbish, because statistically, you could say that was one of our better performances, but actually, United didn't have any clear-cut chances. So, going on to, well, the intensity was off, and I said this, and I said to Rob was saying aggression, but I don't think we weren't aggressive. For me, aggressiveness is, we weren't bullied, to put it that way. Intensity was an issue. When I look at the defensive problems, it's something we talk about all the time, and it's not, you know what though, Kieran, it's not even that many from open play. United have conceded the first goal in 50% of the Premier League games. You can't do that. It's not sustainable. You can't win a title doing that. In 50% of your games, you're conceding the first goal. And then the second point as well is that's 8 Premier League goals now out of the 25 or 26 we conceded, which have been from set pieces. You can't do that. It's just not sustainable. And this was my problem early on in the season. Remember when I was saying, United should replace Ollie. I'm not saying that now, but I'm saying at the time, I said the way we're playing, and you were saying the same thing, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable to go behind or to play poorly and win. And this is what we were doing. Then we started playing well again. I think the biggest thing when it comes to the corners, and I've rewatched some of them actually today just to get a bit of an overview, because we were going to talk about it tonight. And anyone that keeps on saying, "Oh, zonal marking's rubbish, we shouldn't zonal mark," they're just clueless. They don't know what they're talking about, because you can't blame the system. There's strengths and weaknesses of both systems, zonal and man marking, but you can't just say, "Oh, it's because it's zonal." Teams mess up doing man marking. The biggest problem, Kieran, is that no one's taking control in the box, and that goes to the goalkeeper. I love David De Gea. I protect him to the hilt, but he does not command that box well enough, and that's a big problem, because that radiates a lot of, I would say, nervousness throughout the players. And then your captain, Harry Maguire, who should be an absolute rock at the back in his own box, he usually is. He's not talking enough, and this is a really, really big problem. So I think what it is that the coaching staff haven't identified what the issue is, so they need to take criticism. And the players aren't doing their roles properly. And when there's lack of communication and when the coaching staff aren't fixing it, I always say repetitive, whether it's good or bad, repetitive behaviors become habit. And United have got bad habits. So what do they do now? They do a hybrid between man marking and zonal, but they don't know what bit is man marking, what bit is zonal. So look, the planning is not necessarily the problem. The execution is really, really poor. And ultimately, 8 Premier League goals, that's nearly a third of your goals have been from set pieces. That is not good enough. And these smaller sides are going to come to Old Trafford, or when we go away, and they're just going to launch the ball into the box from these positions. And United will concede goals, and then ultimately they will not win the title because of that.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue. It comes down to execution. Yes, I think people have it fixed in their head, because especially I think even people from our age group as well, because when we were younger, a lot of the problems that we used to see coming from corners was down to zonal marking, because teams weren't really executing it effectively. But then we've seen that actually a large portion of teams now execute some form of zonal marking. And now we've seen it's more likely to be a hybrid now. You see some aspects of it that are zonal, but then when you look, when it's actually closer to the goal, that's where you have the man marking happening. Usually if there's someone that's a big threat on an opposition team, you'll see that they're usually man marked, because the last thing you need is someone like Kurt Zuma coming up and having a run and start on somebody. But then it does come back to the defense and the goalkeeper, who's actually communicating. This wouldn't happen under Rio or Vidic, because both of them, look, it's very hard for us to explain to people watching on TV. If you've been to Old Trafford or if you've been to one of the away games and seen Manchester United play at corners, at free kicks before, you could hear Vidic and Ferdinand talking to everybody that was there. And this was when De Gea was there as well. And he's never going to improve on coming out for corners or even how he communicates on corners or free kicks. It's just the way he is. The best hope for United that they have is that Dean Henderson can learn from that and improve on that, because he hasn't been that good at it either. So it's not an easy fix to say, bring in Dean Henderson because he can do it. The problem is, and it goes to what you said, Haider, is if this keeps happening, the last thing we need is that to become a habit for Dean Henderson if he's going to take over. And this is the reason why we say so often that there needs to be improvements defensively. You don't see Lindelof and Maguire talk to each other that much. Look, unfortunately for a lot of people, they haven't had a chance to actually see how they communicate when we're actually there at the stadium, because again, they were together for half a season until COVID kind of broke out. So it's hard to tell there, but from what we see on TV, it just doesn't look like they communicate effectively with the defense.
What I will add quickly, Kieran, actually, is that Lindelof is actually a big talker. Like the reports out the club, and there are a lot of reports that he's one of the key leaders in the squad. I actually think that what it is that he is a talker when he doesn't play. Well, you saw the goal yesterday that we conceded. Like, he is a talker, but the problem is him and Maguire don't talk. So I don't understand it. Lindelof will bark orders to everyone else, but Lindelof in himself has deficiencies in his game, so he can't talk because he's not very good at heading the ball, but he is a very good organizer, and that's why he starts the big games. He's fantastic at defending the channels. He's a very smart player. It's a shame he's not stronger. He's not quicker, because he'd be the complete centre back. But there's an issue of communication between Lindelof and Maguire, and that's transpiring in our set pieces.
Yeah, and the most worrying thing, I think, and we'll finish on this, Joe, and it kind of goes to a lot of teams out there, that the lack of communication defensively, and when your captain is your center back, that really speaks volumes when there's an issue with communication in your defense, when really the defensive setup and it should be starting with your defense. When we've spent the amount of money that we have in that defense, you look at over time, all four of those defenders, so Wan-Bissaka, Shaw, Lindelof and Maguire, have all been brought in for decent amounts of money, and we're still talking about we need improvements there. And look, a lot of other teams are seeing the same. What actually needs to change?
Yeah, I don't think any of those back four were brought in for less than 30 million. I don't think. Obviously, in different times, the different values mean different things, but I think not one of them were under 30 million. So that tells you a lot, to be fair, especially when we laugh at Man City for spending millions on fullbacks. You know what I mean? I mean, similar issue for us. But in terms of what needs to change, I think United just need to find out a way of working on set pieces better, more, and whether that means employing a set piece coach, I don't know whether that's something they want to do, but it's clear that whoever's doing the work right now, it isn't working. I don't think it is working, whoever's doing it. What I'll say on the Sheffield United goal is that I think the goalkeeper was fouled, and I think that, you can look at that, and I think that that's a bit of an issue, but you can't just look at that one set piece in isolation, because like Haider said, this has been a problem that's been going on all season for United, and I think they know it as well now, which is even more of a problem. You know what I mean? I think when you're conscious of it, it makes it almost worse, because not only are the other team knowing it, but you're feeling it yourself as well, every corner. And what you see teams doing, and I think it started with Southampton and the corner that they scored earlier in the season, the game there, it's really simple tactic. They're just putting lots of players around David De Gea, because they know if there's one sort of weakness in David De Gea's game, it is that commanding of area, it is that physicality to come through a crowd of players and punch the ball away or catch the ball. It's never really been in his armoury, to be honest, and teams know that. And I think this is the problem. When you get better like Man United have this year, teams have to find another way of beating you, and they're finding it on set pieces at the moment, and it's a real worry. But going back to the communication thing, like you say about Harry Maguire and Lindelof and all these centre-backs, I don't think these centre-backs are playing well individually to be able to have the confidence to be able to organise everyone else. So I think what you're finding is in these set-piece situations, Maguire's concerned about losing his own man. So he's preoccupied with thinking, what have I got to do here? The same with Lindelof. He knows he's not the greatest header of the ball. He's consumed by his own game. I think with Ferdinand and Vidic, they were so confident that they had it locked down, their own game, and they knew what they were doing. They were able to say, you know what, I know what I'm doing. Guys, this is what you need to do. And let's not forget Edwin van der Sar in that as well. He was fantastic at sort of organising people behind Ferdinand and Vidic before De Gea came in. I think that's another problem. I don't think that they have enough confidence at the moment in their own ability to be able to think, I can shelve what I'm doing and organise everybody else, because everyone's scared about making that one individual mistake that's going to lead to a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a problem really in worldwide football. You talk about it and you look at kind of centre halves and who are kind of the main ones that you would be kind of targeting as the up and coming players. And look, there's been talks with Upamecano, there's talks about Pau Torres, and a lot of the kind of big teams are in for them. But other than that, there's not that many that you actually look at out there and you're like, this is a commanding centre half that we have to have. And it's very difficult to kind of build a team when you can't have that kind of dominating partnership, because we've seen how impactful it was for Liverpool. We're looking at how impactful it is for Man City. And I think that there's a lot of teams that are still looking for that impact defensively. Kind of going in towards the end now, we're within the last couple of days of the January transfer window. The two last kind of points that we'll make. The first one is Arsenal signing Martin Odegaard. So again, that's an interesting one because we've just seen Smith Rowe play really, really well as that kind of number 10 kind of creative player. And that's exactly who Arsenal are getting in. And on a 6-month deal, it's a strange one because, look, for anyone who doesn't know the situation around Martin Odegaard, he was at Real Sociedad on a loan. That loan was supposed to be for 2 years. So it was supposed to be last year and it was supposed to be this year. However, COVID hit, Real Madrid weren't able to bring in players. So instead of that, they brought him back and he didn't play. And now he's going off for 6 months to Arsenal. Now, it's an odd one because the player needs to play games. And let's say he does play enough games at Arsenal and he contributes and is a good player. Well, then what happens after that? Because Madrid will call him back. He probably doesn't get games again at Madrid and then has to go somewhere else. It's a very interesting one that I find that if Arsenal were doing this deal, and for the player's sake, I think he probably needed to get an 18-month loan somewhere or another year loan, because getting 6 months into an Arsenal team that has started to play really well, and look, he's going to have to work really hard to get into that team right now. For me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of the practicalities of it. Look, he's a talented player, but when you heard this deal initially, Haider, what was your first reaction?
Arsenal got a really good player. That was my first reaction. Look, Odegaard or Odegaard, I'm not saying it right, obviously. But he's... As soon as he went to Real Madrid, I remember years ago when he was the wonder kid, wasn't it? I thought, one absolutely shocking move. Why? You could have gone to so many clubs. I think Southampton were one of the clubs actually interested at the time. I remember, and this was under... I mean, how old is he now? He's 22, isn't he? So he's been at Real for 5 years. Is it 5 years?
He moved to Real when he was 16. So 6 years.
He's about 6 years. So in 2014, that's the Pochettino era that's going into the Koeman era, I believe. So they were really good at the time. They had Pella, they had Tadic. They were a really good side. Van Dijk was there. They had Odegaard for a year. So I remember genuinely at that time thinking, you've got to go there. Went to Real Madrid, and I knew exactly what was going to happen, because when do they blood youngsters in? I mean, look at Vinicius now. He's been sidelined, obviously, for non-footballing reasons. They got issues in the dressing room. But look, the way I look at it, I agree with you. For the player, I'm not sure how much sense it makes, because I'm not sure Arsenal is the right club for him to go and develop. I think he was fantastic at Sociedad. I think he should have stayed in Spain if he wants to play for Real. For Arsenal, it's a good signing because they need more depth. I know Smith Rowe's been fantastic, but they need more. Like if he starts, he's going to have a dip because youngsters do. What do they have after that? If they have any aspirations of getting back into the top four and doing well at this season, they need more depth. And he's a really good player, but I'm not too sure how he fits into Arsenal's system. I'm not too sure. Yes, they like to play the ball, from the back, through midfield. But my thing with Arsenal is that they're not the most, I wouldn't say the most refined attacking wise. So, and they really do solely focus on two players, Saka and Smith Rowe. And I'm not sure what I liked about him in Sociedad, and I think you'll agree with this, Kieran, is that there was a lot of players around him that were creative. So he wasn't the main focal point. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure for him to come into Arsenal and be that focal point. And I'm not sure that he's got that, if I'm being honest with you. And that's my biggest thing. I think if he'd gone into somewhere like United, I know I would like United to have had a look at him, even on a 6-month loan would have been good. I think he would have found it quite easy to settle into side. Bruno Fernandes, Paul Pogba, a lot more creative players, Marcus Rashford, and he was a cog in a bigger piece. So I really hope it goes well for him. Not too well because I don't want Arsenal to do well, but I really think that he should be looking at another move elsewhere permanently. He needs to go and play because the way that they've handled him over there, in my opinion, has been really, really poor. And something you said to me early on is that he's not match fit. He hasn't played at all for 6 months. So it's going to take him a couple of months to get into some sort of match fitness. So excellent talent, but that move to Real Madrid has definitely not helped his career, but actually still showing glimpses of what we know he can do. So go, mate, I would say to him, go and play. Just go and find someone, go and play week in, week out. That is the most important thing. And then you never know where your career can go.
Yeah, there's two really interesting points there. The one is going to Real Madrid. The problem is he went to Real Madrid and then was put straight into the Castilla team, which is basically their reserves or their youth setup. And the problem about young players who are this, because he was dubbed this next Galactico, is that you go into a Castilla team full of 17, 18-year-olds that are all trying to make the Real Madrid first squad. They don't play together as a team. They're a bunch of individuals. That's why you look at it over time. There's not that many players that have come through the Real Madrid Castilla. It just doesn't work out that way. And really, their system is flawed there. So, yeah, he was on it was a big circus, really, the amount of teams he had trials with. I think he was there with Man City, Man United, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona, all these teams, and eventually goes to Real Madrid. And it was unfortunate, but there are issues. The fact that any Arsenal fan expecting him to come in and have that Bruno type impact, it's just not going to happen. He doesn't score that many goals, and that's the biggest weakness to his team or to his game. He's a very creative player, but again, the output just always isn't there. And I've said this before, he's the type of player that it takes him a couple games to get going. It's one of those that at the start of most seasons that he's played, that he hasn't really arrived in shape to really start. And that's a big issue when you're only on a 6-month loan. He really needs to hit the ground running because he needs to impress to the point that Madrid would want to sell him, because he needs to get, like you said, Haider, he needs to get a permanent deal somewhere because he needs to be able to play. Even if it's where it's a Sergio Reguilon type deal where Madrid can get him back in 2 or 3 years, he needs to start playing football.
He should have gone to Brighton, somewhere like that, under Chris Potter. I always say that it's Graham Potter. Yeah, that's where he should have gone.
Yeah,
that's genuinely where he should have.
Yeah, there's teams like that that'd be great. I would have liked to see him if he wanted to go to the Premier League. Obviously, he's wanted to come in. A perfect team that would have been for him would have been Aston Villa. That's the type of team where you have the likes of Ross Barkley, Jack Grealish, Ollie Watkins all around. Arsenal, I just feel the expectations are going to be too high for such a short deal. It's very, very difficult. We don't see many short deals be that successful. Usually for strikers, yeah.
Sorry, Kate. You know what the problem is with this deal as well is it's a business deal. For me, it's not about player development, player growth. I think Real Madrid have sent him to Arsenal, and I don't mean to be cynical here, hoping that he'll be impactful for 2 or 3 months. and it will raise his transfer fee when they want to sell him in the summer. And I don't know if you're going to talk about it in a minute. I think United are doing exactly the same with Jesse Lingard. I think they're obviously looking to offload him in the summer. So you send him to West Ham. He has a good second half of the season. United probably get 10 million for him, where they'd probably get 5 if he didn't go on loan, if he were just in the United squad. And that's what it's all about, unfortunately. I know it seems quite a cynical thing to say, but I think that's what Real Madrid are doing. And you've got to be careful because it can backfire on you. I think Arsenal did something similar with Lucas Torreira in the Partey deal to Atletico Madrid, hoping that maybe he might play quite a bit for Atletico, but it just hadn't happened. And while he's there and he's sat on the bench at Atletico, his value and his stock's going down. Because let's be honest, Torreira has no future at Arsenal now. So it's all about finding a valuation for him and selling him, and it's just not happening. And I think this is what's at play here with these 2 loan deals that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect segue to the breaking news that's just kind of happened over the past hour, that Jesse Lingard did agree a deal to West Ham. There's a loan fee of about $1.5 million going to Manchester United. Look, that's not a big thing. Again, Jesse does come under the same light as Odegaard, where he needs to play. He hasn't played in a long time. And at a team like West Ham, it actually could work, because you look at some of the players that they have, it's not going to put all the pressure on Jesse. Jesse needed to get out of Manchester United, to be honest, because it got to a point where he has a lot going on in his life, and he doesn't need the abuse that he got playing for Manchester United. And it's a shame, because he came through the youth setup. You could see how much he cared when he was playing, and just because he wasn't playing that well, he got abused. And look, it's coming in a dark day where we're seeing other players in the team get abused for completely different reasons. But again, I think this is probably just good for Jesse, just to get him playing. The good thing about going to West Ham is if he plans to stay in the Premier League, if he performs well for West Ham, as we've just seen with Benrahma that they brought in. He was initially on loan because they wanted to bring Jesse in on loan. He's now been signed permanently. So I think this is kind of a little bit different to Odegaard, where this is a plan to try, and West Ham were one of the teams that were interested in the summer. The deal didn't get done, and now it's come about again. I think this is more of, if he can be impactful with that West Ham team, which there's no reason he can't, that maybe this is a permanent deal when it hits the summertime. How do you think about that, Haider?
I just want to say, when it comes to Jesse Lingard, any Manchester United youth product is going to find it difficult at Manchester United. There's for several reasons for that. The first one is that the expectation. When you're a local lad, fans love to pile on the expectation that you're going to be the next best thing. Problem is that the class of 92 was so good. We have not had a class of 92 since class of 92. We haven't. You listen to James Wilson was one player, Danny Welbeck. Even Jimmy Garner, young Jimmy Garner, the expectation he's going to be the next Carrick. Jimmy Garner probably won't make the grade, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. But he can go and have a fantastic career, elsewhere in the Premier League and be a really good Premier League player. My biggest issue when it comes to people with our youth players is there's two sides of the camp, but sides of the coin. Sorry, one side give them absolutely no patience. Oh, they're rubbish, so they're only here because they're youth players, and you find that a lot. Not to say all foreign fans like this, but the ones that aren't from the UK and aren't from like we're here, we're in the UK. Like, there's a bit more of an emphasis, I feel, on the youth, and I think abroad. This is a generalization. I'm not saying everyone's like this, but you do see there's less patience. Then you get the other side where they think they're the next best thing. And realistically, look, only Marcus and Greenwood are here. The others aren't. And the ones coming through, I'm honestly going to tell you 1 or 2 will be here in 5 years' time. And that'll be probably Mejbri and probably Mengi. I don't think any of the other ones will be here. Galbraith looks good, but I don't. Scott McTominay's another one who has defied the odds, really. So when you're a local lad playing for your local club, the expectation is it's like a cauldron. And you look at it with Ross Barkley, you had to move away. You look at it with Jack Grealish, the pressure on him, the way he's overcome that, and he is the poster boy. And Jesse Lingard, unfortunately, is falling into that category where fans expect so much from him, but they also abuse him because he is a local lad. Oh, you're only here because you came through the academy. Jesse Lingard has scored some massive goals for Manchester United. Jesse Lingard is not a bad footballer. Jesse Lingard is a talented footballer. He's got great energy. He presses well. He's got a good touch, good control. He has got an eye for a goal and assist. He just needs a new challenge. Is he good enough to start week in, week out for Manchester United? No, he's not. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. Doesn't mean he deserves the abuse he got. And unfortunately for him, because Bruno Fernandes is so good, he's someone that gets so much criticism. So it's disgusting, mate. We've seen with what's happened with Axel, with Martial, his wife, getting sent these horrible, disgusting messages. What is wrong with people? But, the worst thing as well, we've seen people defend it on Twitter. We don't need to go into it. We know exactly what we're talking about. Someone saying that it's racist, should be allowed to say what they want because it defends freedom of speech. This is a problem. And unfortunately, that when you couple it with these players also being black, Kieran, that's an extra thing to beat them out with, local lad and black. So I really hope he goes and plays and enjoys. He needs to change the scenery, mate. He needs to go and play regularly. He needs to be out of the spotlight, Manchester United. He should just be another player at a club, not a local lad, not held to a standard unfairly. And unfortunately, mate, our fans are spoiled. Our fans are patient. Our fans have a lot of them have very little knowledge for the game. It's just a fact. We guys do regular podcasts, and sometimes you see some of the comments and you think, what are you watching? How are you interpreting this? Jesse Lingard could have been a good squad player at Man United. He's won us the FA Cup. We won the League Cup with him as well. He's won the Europa League at Manchester United. He's been more successful than a lot of players, and he should go with his head held high. I hope he goes to West Ham and kills it. I hope he gets a permanent deal. And I just hope he plays because he's definitely good enough to be a Premier League player, but he's not a Manchester United player, and that's fine. Not everyone's got to be Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing that I think, and it's nice to see Jesse actually get a move because he's been wanting one. It's obvious that he's wanted one from the end of last season because he wants to play football. And the one thing I think you can probably agree, Joe and Haider, is that he's always treated himself with class. I know people kind of slag him off because of his kind of online platform and stuff. But look, I didn't see any other Man United player come out to, I think it was 2 seasons or 3 seasons ago at Hotel Futbol, literally went into the local bar there and bought every single Manchester United fan a drink. And it was just to say thank you for their support for the season. Now, when do you see any player take time after the last game of a season to just say thanks to the fans that are there? It doesn't happen. He has that connection with the club, and to see the way people treat them is ridiculous. It goes to the same part of with Marcus Rashford. He got so criticized over lockdown for doing something that really he shouldn't have had to do. The fact that we saw these big time politicians and big Twitter accounts completely criticize what he was doing when all he was trying to do was something as very simple as to feed kids, to make sure that because they're not in school, that they're still getting the nutrition that they need. Because look, if he wasn't in school at the time, he wouldn't have been able to get it. And these types of players are getting criticized. It's the same for Jesse Lingard. He's never been someone, look, people got annoyed at him because of some of his online posts, which were, look, they might have been silly just promoting his own brand, but it was never something controversial that would put something at detriment to the club. So how do you feel about this, Joe? Because I think it is an important issue that it doesn't just happen at Manchester United. It happens at a lot of clubs now where these young players that come through, and unfortunately it happens to be when they're black players, because we saw the same thing happen with Mason Greenwood. And look, Phil Foden had the same thing happen, but then everyone forgot it for Phil Foden and it kept coming up for Mason Greenwood. Do we have a real big problem especially in the Premier League now, with both the media and fans? I don't even want to say it's criticism. I think it's targeted harassment of some of these young players.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I suppose one positive for Jesse is at least he's going to another club with less abusive fans, isn't he? I'm not quite sure about that, to be honest. But anyway, look, whatever happens at West Ham, I hope it works out for him. We know what their fans can be like. Haider touched on it when we were talking earlier about David Moyes. So, look, whatever happens at West Ham, I hope he hits the ground running and I hope it works out for him. On racism, like I said to you guys on camera, it's difficult for me to comment on that, really, being a middle-aged white man. All I will say is that these people are vile and disgusting. And that's all I can say. And whether they support my club or they support any other club, they just don't deserve that ounce of success if that's the way that they're going to live their lives. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was so angry last night. I'm at the moment I'm in lockdown with my parents. They'll tell you, well, they won't because they're not going to come on camera now. But obviously, I went to bed last night. I was so angry. I didn't want to speak to anyone or anything like that. But at no point did I ever feel like picking up my phone and targeting just unbelievable abuse at these players. I don't know what makes these people tick. I don't know what makes them do it. I mean, I was so angry last night. But it was the last thing in my mind. It didn't even enter my mind. So I can't explain it, but there is definitely an unconscious bias there. I think a lot of it comes down to jealousy, Kieran, to be honest. I think sometimes people just have it in for a player and they're jealous of their lifestyle, what they've got, their talent, the lifestyle that they're able to live. People just can't get over that, and that's their problem at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Go out there and make something of yourself. Don't hate on everyone else, obviously. You know what I mean? But that's the only thing I can put it down to now, because some of this stuff is inexplicable. And, you've even got people on Twitter today, like Haider said, that are out there even trying to defend it in sort of a subtle, subliminal way. I mean, that's the worst, to be honest. I mean, that almost makes it worse, the fact that you're trying to disguise who you are and what you are. And it's awful, mate. But, on Jesse, on a personal level in his football career, I really hope it works out for him. Yes, he's made some mistakes. Of course he has. But every player does, and that's going to happen. But I wish him nothing but the best for his career. Obviously, there is a Euros at the end of this year. I think it's too late for him to probably put a run together to get in that squad. But his England career is not totally over yet. I mean, when we played in that World Cup in 2018, Jesse brought something to the team that nobody else had. So, I mean, he's got, he was a vital part of that 2018 World Cup run. So there is definitely a player in there. You don't become a bad player overnight. And I think it's a good club for it. The only thing is you just want him to get game time, don't you? Whenever you look at these loan moves for players who need game time, you think to yourself, will you get game time there? Will it be any different for you? Because we've talked about West Ham. They're doing really well at the moment, and, they've got quite a settled side. So you're hoping that wherever he goes, it looks like it'd be West Ham, he will get game time there. I don't know what you think on that, Kieran. I don't really know much about that West Ham team enough to know whether he'll start or not, but he needs to, or it's a bit of a pointless move.
Yeah, I think he'll get a good amount of game time. Look, he needs to get back to match fitness as well, because he hasn't played in a competitive game in a while. I think the last time was maybe Norwich last year when we were playing in the FA Cup. So I think once he gets back, but I think it's a good side to be brought into. You have Jared Bowen there, you have Antonio, you have Souček, and you have a team that's been playing really well, and they can play in many different ways. I think it's a good move for him. Hopefully he can hit the ground running and get that move in the summer that really he wants and deserves, because look, not many people say it too much, but he's one of the nice guys in football and deserves to get somewhere where he gets to just start enjoying his football again, because that's where his best performances were for Manchester United. You think of the Crystal Palace game and the final of the FA Cup, and he was always playing with a smile on his face, and that just kind of tend to go away the last kind of 18 months, and hopefully he can get that back. And look, we mentioned it before, but the whole idea of the abuse online, I think it's just because of how close these footballers are now to people because of social media, that by a click of a button, someone can message the people they're watching on TV. And look, when we were growing up, we could never imagine something like that happening. And it's just so easy for people. We saw it earlier on in the season with Wilfried Zaha, where he was targeted as well. And the kid that did it, again, from what it came out, is that he basically buckled once it came to when it was in front of the police. And it just shows that people don't think when they say these things. I've seen people create Twitter accounts in relation to what happened yesterday, and it's one thing. I think people need to, when you lose a game, you need to stay off social media if you're going to be angry, because it's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help you, because again, this is going out in public. So you need to make sure that you can be mad, you can criticize. Criticism is actually really good, but there's a difference between criticizing and abusive behavior, and that needs to change. And we see too much of it at football stadiums when we were able to go.
But Kieran, people do it on Twitter, because who are the ones with the biggest accounts, right? These idiots with the biggest accounts. They always try and be funny, and some of them are funny, but half the time it's ripping into someone, isn't it? Like, you see half the stuff you see, like it's embarrassing. Like, and even the way that people talk about other teams, Diverpool, Loserpools. I saw someone call Lampard Fatpard. Like, all you're seeing going around is, it's funny. You see these pictures. It's funny. It was funny for about 5 minutes. These pictures where people blow up Lampard fat or Klopp fat. It was funny for about 5 minutes now, and you see it the whole time. But like, it's just always about appearance. People are abusing people about appearance, and like, it's just child's play, childish.
I don't understand it.
I don't get it either. It comes with this. I think it's just this new age fan that if they don't get what they want change, and they want to say exactly how they feel. But look, the way the world works is that, I know people want to say this freedom of speech, but you can't just go around saying whatever you like. If you try and say some of the things that we've seen online to a police officer on the street, it's not like you can say it and you'll be able to walk free. So I think people need to think about that when they're actually posting on Twitter. There's a big discussion that can be had on this, and I've seen a lot of good accounts out there actually start a discussion on what a lot of these social media platforms should be doing. I know a lot of this kind of hit the mainstream media with all those riots that happened in America, where there was people talking about the kind of onus on some of these social media companies, and there is, because some of this shouldn't be happening, and something has to change because it's getting worse. We used to see it at stadiums, and you saw the minority, but now you're starting to see it more on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, all the time, and it's getting worse and worse. And look,
do you know what I don't agree with when people say racism's in the minority? Because actually, no,
it's not.
It's not. It's actually a minority of people that aren't doing it, Kieran. And also, it's the other way around. Like, look, racism is traditionally to obviously brown and black people, but you do see a lot of black and brown people who really don't like any white players as well. That's just as toxic. There are certain big figures on YouTube that are like that, and myself and Kieran have experienced it with one particular individual who will leave unnamed. And he plays the game, and people are all about clout. Like, we know people are about clout, but one of the biggest things you talk about these social media companies, if they decide to go and get people to sign up with their passports, driving license, or their national insurance numbers, social security numbers, whatever it is, their numbers are going to go, their revenue is going to drop. So why would they? And people have to remember as well that, without getting too political, all these big tech companies are like, they're all lefties. Like, they don't care. Like, for them, it's all about like people being able to say what they want. They're not conservatives.
Can I just say as well, Kieran, on the abuse thing? I mean, the two things that always make me wonder how it even gets to that is that, for me, you have to go through two processes before you're going to abuse a player, right? First of all, it's got to come in your head, all right? It's got to come in your head. These thoughts have got to be in your head, which for me, it doesn't get to that level, but it's so messed up, Kieran, that it even gets into the head. Once it's got into the head, there's then the next step. Have you then got to put it out there to the world, okay? So people who are abusing are going through two messed up steps for me. Fair enough if you've got these thoughts in your mind and they're the first thing that comes to mind when you lose or when you see a player. If you think that, fair enough. But then you make a conscious decision to then air your thoughts to the world. If you want to think like that, that is fine. But there is a difference. Well, it's not fine. It's wrong. But there is a difference between thinking it, Kieran, and then putting it out there for the world to see. And they are two massive steps for me that I couldn't even dream of taking one. And some people take the two steps so easily. And that's what I do not understand.
Yeah, look, it's a horrible thing that we've seen over the last 24 hours, but I guess the unfortunate thing is this isn't going to be the last incident this season or in any other season, because it's getting worse and worse and worse. And look, we're seeing it even more now because there's no fans in the stadium and everybody's at home watching. And I guess that's one of the things that we're seeing. It just shows you just how bad it's been. But look, let's hope that we don't have to have too many more of these conversations. Unfortunately, I'd say this is something that people actually need to talk about and stop hiding away that this doesn't happen. Like Haider said, that it's not a minority anymore. It's happening all the time, and it's something that really needs to change. I think that's the best way to kind of end it on that note, that people need to think back and look, it's a game of football at the end of the day. You win, you lose. Sometimes your team's going to win, sometimes they're going to lose. And I think what we need to sit back on is kind of what Joe said is, one, the fact that you could have a thought like that in your head. Just because you have a thought like that in your head doesn't mean that it needs to be written down and displayed for other people to see. But unfortunately, the way kind of commentary on football is now, it's very reactionary and people being angry about things. And it would be nice to see that change over kind of the next couple of seasons. And look, it's the reason why we kind of do what we do now. We've been involved with the Elite Football Show for now, 6 months? And I think that we've tried to drive a lot of really good conversations. And
it's happening, mate. We're making a small wave, I suppose, in the ocean, but unfortunately, well, know what you have found. I think a positive. I want to sort of end on a positive. You have found that there's some really fantastic listeners out there, mate. Intelligent, who people want quality content. The issue is Joe having a big breather.
Sorry, I got a blocked nose, guys, and I forgot to put it on mute. Sorry, guys.
One of the biggest issues is that it's about getting it out onto a bigger platform, and unfortunately, like we've seen it, if you have a clip which is inflammatory, you've seen it with Rants and other people when they're inflammatory, what is going to happen is that's going to get retweeted. Think about how many good clips we put out for Red Devils Talk, for the masterclass, after this show, really well-informed opinions. It's not going to bang. But if someone turns around and says, I effing hate McTominay, which is what Rand said, people go, oh my God, how can you say that? You're just feeding the beast. I know people retweet it with their comments, but it makes it worse. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it. But we've got some fantastic listeners who are engaging, who are intelligent, and there is actually a desire for analytical, top quality content. There is. I've seen it out there, but it's about how do you get to the mass market. So that's why people we've got to work together. Help Kieran grow, help Elite Football Show grow. We've got Joe with Paulie help him grow. And these sort of things, it's going to take time, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing that we've started to see, and there's many people out there that we engage with on Twitter that have small accounts and didn't have that big of a platform. But when you actually listen to them, the analysis is there. We get to hear it quite a lot when, especially for your show, Haider, on the masterclass, which everybody should check out after every single Manchester United game. Just another little plug there. Yeah, exactly. But again, that's what we need to get to. And it's like Haider said, it's a good way to end it, that there are some really, really good viewers out there. There are some great accounts out there that people should be following and supporting, because that's kind of what we want. And we don't want to get to that point of where everybody that's online is this reactionary, where they just want to shout about what's going on and say, like Haider says, I effing hate this player because XYZ. We want to be able to, if he plays bad, you criticize and you say how this can get better. And that's the only way I think fandom overall will get better. So I just we'll end it there, and we'll basically continue this conversation next time, because it's a really important one to have, and it's one that I don't think enough people out there are having. So I just want to say thanks to Joe and Haider for joining me today. You'll definitely be seeing these guys again. You can catch us on Red Devils Talk next week as well. I think it's probably going to be Wednesday, depending on the games. But again, every week you'll be able to catch us either on a Tuesday or Wednesday there. And you can catch all of the shows on Haider's platform on Elite Football Show. Is there anything else you'd like to plug there, Haider, before we go?
Give this man a subscribe and a follow because he's doing some great stuff. He's got some great content. And give Joe a follow because he likes to jump on Twitter once a day and he likes to destroy people. So it's quite funny.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm getting the wrong reputation, but no, I'd echo this. Follow you two guys. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I've talked football with a lot of people, both on social media and just recreationally, and there's not many people talk more sense than these two. So yeah, give them a follow and some great content. And I'll keep beating the drum that we don't get involved with fan channel stuff, guys. We are not fan channeling, and if you want a definition of that, feel free to DM me, feel free to tweet me, and I'll tell you the difference between what we do and what a fan channel does.
Absolute facts, spitting facts. And that is the truth. It's a podcast. We're not going to do reactionary stuff. We're going to deep dive into things analytically. Podcasts might be an hour and 20 like today. They could be 45 minutes. But what we'll do, Siri's listening to everything I'm doing. What we will do, though, is we will break things down with a calm and collected mind.
Exactly.
That's the perfect way to end the podcast. Thanks, guys, for today. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.